All right, well, we'll get started.
Okay. All right. And she's over there, so if I move around this way, that'd be fine. Tiptoe.
Okay.
It's so easy.
All right. Whoa. I gotta sit on the chair, not the arm. So basically, if we could start with just kind of a brief background story about, surviving cancer, about, I don't know how to ask the question, but, kind of as you started
what
with
diagnosis
what kind of
and all that
cancer,
stuff?
diagnosis, everything else. Yeah.
All right, let's see. So when I was 36 years old, which wasn't that long ago for me, I was diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma, which is a blood cancer. And at that time, Steve and I were right in the process of adopting a little girl from China. We had gone through multiple miscarriages and decided that was the route we were going to go. And we had identified a little girl who had some special needs. So we were being fast-tracked to that. We were going to be traveling in October of that year. And this was in June. And I identified a couple of things in my body that were weird. I'd gone through tons of physicals for the adoption process, but it's just something that I knew was off, a couple lumps in my neck. And went into the ER one night because I was having trouble breathing. And the result of all that was the diagnosis of lymphoma, and it was all throughout my neck and chest. So that changed our plans pretty drastically, because we went from being, expectant parents to really being kind of fighters for my own life. The adoption was then off, of course, because of complications. And within maybe 3 weeks, I was starting treatment, which ended up being chemotherapy, 12 rounds, given every other week. And that was for about 7 months I did that. And it was a tough process. It took it took most of my health away from me. I was one of those people that ended up with almost all of the symptoms, so all the side effects. Like I lost my hair, I lost my toenails, I had tons of skin changes. I actually had a reaction to one of the medications that we didn't realize what it was until way further into the treatment. So I had tons of breathing complications. I had some toxicity issues with the chemo, just lots and lots of stuff, and all the other stuff that everybody goes through, the nausea and all of that. So it was a tough fight. It was not without collateral damage, that's for sure. And then starting in the first of the year in 2007, I had a scan that was supposed to be clean, and it came back a little sketchy. And so then we had a long wait period to rescan to see if that was actually cancer growing or if it was something else. I had a clean scan then about the middle of March 2007. And I scan every 6 months, and I've been clean ever since.
Wow. Something you mentioned earlier when you said, when you got done with treatment, you said you felt like a foreigner in your own body. Can you explain that a little bit to me?
So one of the things for me is I've always felt really in tune with my body. Like I was just one of those people that I just kind of know what's going on. I always knew I was getting a cold before I got a cold, and I always kind of just felt in tune with my body. And I've always had a fairly good body image and self-image too. So I felt like I was like really like okay with my body. And so for me, one of the hardest things was this idea that my body kind of turned against me. I used to say, like, after all I'd done for it, it totally turned against me, in the sense that all of a sudden my body was growing this killer inside of it. And the only way to do something about it was to fight it. And people who've been diagnosed with cancer hear that a lot. That's a pretty common thing. We say it to each other, and people say it to us, is you really have to fight this, and you're going to have to fight it, and get ready for the fight of your life, and all that kind of stuff. And I understand it, but I hated it. I hated this idea that I had to go to war against my body. And so by the end of chemo, I was not just tired. I was physically different. My body felt different to me. Inside it felt different, like being in my body felt different, and then I looked different. I didn't even recognize myself in the mirror. Something as simple as just my skin tone, and it was so much more than losing my hair. I just lost color and my skin tone and my skin texture. I looked older to me. My body had very little muscle tone left because I was so sick during treatment. I really couldn't be that physically active. And I just suddenly felt like I was left with this body that wasn't mine. I felt displaced, disoriented, and there's not much, you know, the scientific and the medical community does a great job at getting you through treatment, but they do a really poor job, in my opinion, of dealing with you afterwards. I mean, that's their job. Their job is to get rid of the cancer in your body, and that's what they did, and they did it great. But then I'm left with this body that I don't understand, and that I didn't know, and I didn't like. I really didn't. It was really hard. And for me, it was not just being left with this body, but also with no plan. Like, at least for those 7 months that I was going through treatment, at least I was doing something. It was horrible, but I was doing it. I was actively doing something to be well. And then you're kicked out of the nest, and there's no plan, and there's no process, and it's just cross your fingers and hope that it doesn't come back. And that was really hard. It was probably, for me, it was harder than even dealing with the cancer itself, because I had no plan. I didn't know what I was going to do.